years ago, I started going to Black Lives Matter vigils on the first Thursday of the month. There were about a dozen of us at the beginning. We would read the names of people of color who had been murdered. Trayvon Martin, Dante Parker, the Reverend Clemente C. Pinckney, Walter Scott, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, on and on. Then we stood silently in front of the Baptist church downtown, holding signs that said things like, "Nobody is free until everybody is free," or "All immigrants welcome," or just "Black Lives Matter." Sometimes people driving by would give us the finger, but more often they would smile or honk. A car window would just roll down and someone would lean out and say, "Thank you," or "God bless." A few times, people walking by paused and went from one end of the vigil line to the other, shaking our hands one by one. Half a century ago, with a brand new credential as an English teacher, I spent a summer teaching at the Booker T. Washington School in Columbia, South Carolina. We were there to help Black kids prepare for their first integrated schools. Now, lying wide awake in bed, haunted by the pale faces of rich men appointed to power, I try to remember the bright and eager faces of the students. Oscar, Jewel, Elizabeth, Jamal, Lollipop. After the first few months of vigils, I went online and found a bookstore in St. Louis that sold Black Lives Matter lawn signs for about $7 each. They were printed to bear witness after Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson. I bought 20 and gave them to my neighbors. Once they were up, people who saw the signs keeping their own vigil up and down our street wanted to know where they could get some. I ordered more. James knocked on my door early in the fall. He was a soft-spoken Black man who had shaken our hands one by one in the vigil. He heard I had signs. He wanted to know where he could get some for his own neighborhood. He'd need maybe 15. So I offered to order him some and have it sent to his home. But then the election happened. In the days afterwards, I did all the things that privileged people do when they're frightened. I gave money. I signed petitions and letters. I called offices. I talked to people who basically agreed with me, and I listened to commentaries. And I read analyses and I was just fed up with all of them. I meditated. I wore a safety pin on my jacket so that vulnerable people would recognize me as an ally. I imagined in detail how I would intervene to calm or distract a bully. But nobody with a hijab or dreadlocks seemed to need my help. Then one evening, James stopped by. "Just wondering about the signs," he said. I said, "Those should have arrived a long time ago." I said I would call the bookstore to find out what happened. He looked at me, and then he looked away. "Listen," he said. I can pay for the signs. It was nice that you got this started, but we can raise the money in my neighborhood. I told him no. I told him I like to do something useful, now more than ever. Okay then, he said. Like you said, maybe you can call the bookstore. Rightly or wrongly, I heard in his voice a polite expectation of betrayal. You people mean well, he seemed to be thinking, but you fade in the stretch. They do something nice, and then they wander off. Or they'll turn on you. They'll decide that white men with guns standing over dead black people are innocent, time after time. Or they'll somehow elect a man who is brilliant, thoughtful, dignified, and black. And then sure enough, the next person they choose will be a racist millionaire who knows nothing. That's how it goes. When I called the bookstore in St. Louis, they told me that the signs for James had shipped a month ago. I ordered more. Then, that evening, I got a phone call from someone named Brenda. She said she had a lot of stuff on her back porch. 5 kids, she said, make a mess of the back porch. She only now noticed this box that wasn't for her after all. She couldn't say how long it had been there. She said it had my name and my phone number on it, and it was for a James somebody. Well, her husband's name was James, but the last name was wrong and the address was wrong. So she was just calling to let me know. I thanked her for her kindness and for taking the trouble. Then I told her that the box was full of Black Lives Matter signs that I'd ordered for a friend of mine. Well, for a moment, she said nothing. Then she said, I'm blue-eyed Irish, middle child of 7. My husband James is from Haiti. Like I said, we have 5 kids. My brother's wife Nirmala is Pakistani. Family gets big enough. We're all in this together. She said she'd like some signs for her neighborhood too. So I took over 10 when I went to pick up James's box, and I asked her to call me if she needed more. We hugged each other. When we gathered for the December vigil, the first Thursday of the month, many more people were there than ever before. We were stretched down the block on both sides of the street. I recognized people from my church and people who had been there from the beginning. Newcomers outnumbered us. There were earnest women in knitted caps that looked like veteran protesters. People with nose rings and turquoise hair. Heavy-set men wearing Patriot sweatshirts. A few men wearing yarmulkes. Lesbian couples with young children and clusters of high school students. More women than men. And most, but not all of us, were white. Disempowered. Deeply shaken. outsiders, united in protest. Standing in the cold, my heart slowly warmed. I don't know how we're going to get through these next few years. But standing, holding my Black Lives Matter sign in the silence as the light faded, I felt at home. I turned to the guy standing beside me and asked for his name. We shook hands. When the family gets big enough, we're all in this together.